As usual, we have a lot to talk about on today's roundtable, and we have a great roundtable for you, so let's get right to some introductions. H.T. Smith is a well-known attorney, community activist, and law professor at Florida International University.
Is he ever? And a legal legend. Here's another one, Mary Lee Cancio, Miami-based attorney, active in the state Republican Party, and we are glad to welcome back Patricia Mazzei, the lead political reporter for the Miami Herald. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Icon, legal icon,
Legal
I believe
icon.
is what it was.
I was there for that award. Patty, you've been very busy this week. You and a colleague were down there, Doug Hanks, I believe, were at Miami-Dade County Hall for that marathon public hearing, which resulted in that 9-3 vote to back the mayor. Did the size of that winning margin surprise you, or?
You know, I think that was the count we kind of had it going into the meeting. No minds were changed from what I could tell, even though we had about 150 people speak and only a handful supported the mayor, and most were there to speak against the policy. It's like they were talking different conversations, right? They were talking past each other. People were there to make an emotional, moral appeal about the county's identity as an immigrant city, and the commissioners were thinking they were making a very narrow decision about money. And so I'm not sure they were having the same conversation.
Well, they actually were making a narrower, I don't know about money, but they were making a very specific decision. Mary Lee, it seems like not only this decision, but every conversation about every specific policy that has to do with immigration is sort of conflated into the larger national crackdown on illegal immigrants. And that kind of is what I was hearing on Friday.
I find it very unfortunate and unfair with Mayor Jimenez in particular. He's doing his job, and the commission understands that. He's an immigrant as well. This is a community of immigrants, but this is not about whether you like immigrants, sympathize with immigrants. This is about following the law. Someone that obeys the law and doesn't go to jail doesn't have to worry about this. Just like we heard in the previous segment, the police is not going to go after anybody on the streets. This is very limited. And after 48 hours, if ICE doesn't send anyone to pick them up, you know, they go about their business, just like it was before 2013.
Yeah.
Right. But HT, you know, I think part of the issue that Patty and Glenna, I have reported on, is that Mayor Jimenez said he would comply with the president's order within 24 hours, even less, of the president issuing it. It was part of what many objected to, was the timing of how he did it.
Right, without any input from the community, without any consultation with the commission. I think,
or maybe with the county attorney, as far as we know.
Definitely with the county attorney.
It's unclear if Miami-Dade would have even been affected.
Right. But I think Mary Lee is right in terms of him doing his job. I think the more effective and honest argument is that this is a unfunded mandate. The federal government is saying to the people of Dade County, we demand that you hold these people, demand at the penalty of we not giving you money you're entitled to, from 2 to 5 days. For instance, if they had asked for someone Wednesday, you hold them Thursday, Friday, the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. Monday is a holiday, it's 5 days. You taxpayers feed them. You taxpayers provide dental care. You taxpayers provide medical care, as well as prescription drugs. And you pay it, and we're not going to refund you.
That already happens when someone goes to jail.
But that was the argument in the first place for overturning it.
But we will, yeah, that happens, but it wouldn't happen the extended period of time that the government is required. So the federal government is asking us to hold them longer to pay for all of those things. Okay, fine, but you pay us back. The taxpayers, me, you, and Patty.
Well, let me just say that we all heard the public defender say on Friday that his attorneys are now advising their clients who might be undocumented, do not bond out, because you may end up at Chrome Detention Center, which goes to the same cost.
Well, and he also said when this policy was what the county did before 2014, that it was not just affecting undocumented people who are in jail, it was affecting lawful permanent residents and asylum seekers who were getting caught up in ICE processes. And then, even though they were legally in the country, they were having to go through judicial proceedings in immigration court. So it was, you know, it might have unintended consequences. And to Michael's point, the mayor made a decision that was hasty, that was not clear if the county would have been affected, apparently not really consulting with the county attorney, who later had to say, oh, by the way, the commission needs to vote on this. By the way, you can't do it by yourself. And so I think the way it played out was unexpected for the mayor's staff, and he was on vacation in Orlando and he signed off on it. They probably don't like to hear that, but it was a big deal because they didn't realize that it was going to be a big emotional debate that was going to go to the hearts of a lot of people.
But sympathy will not win this debate. Mary Lee said it correctly. The mayor is doing his job, and that's why I think we have to respond to the mayor's argument with the counter argument. You said it's a financial matter? Fine. The finances, this is a federal unfunded mandate.
Well, the mayor pointed out on Friday, as he had before he did on this program a couple of weeks ago, that at stake was in the vicinity of $350 million in federal grants, monies coming here, plus maybe billions for future road projects. Although, Mary Lee, you are the attorney, I am not, but there have been, I've seen, court decisions that say that the federal government cannot use coercion of that kind to prevent monies coming. But on the other hand, Donald Trump, like other presidents, you reward your friends, you punish their enemies, and he liked what Carlos Gimenez did.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And what I have to say is that Miami-Dade County was never a sanctuary county. And I think it's important to note that following the law, there's nothing wrong with that. My concern is the emotional well-being of a lot of illegal immigrants in our community that are very scared and very anxious. And I think it's irresponsible to fuel that, because we got to tell them, just like Officer Ramirez said earlier, the police is not going to arrest you unless you commit a crime. If you need help, call them. I think it's important to keep sending that message out to the community.
Right.
You know, we need to turn to the president back
we do.
in our part of the state again. Right now, as we speak,
Can you blame him? The weather's so much nicer.
well, no.
And he carried Florida. He won
And
Florida.
he carried Florida. And
the governor's his
yesterday,
friend.
and yesterday he was in Melbourne doing some campaigning. It looked like, instead of governing. That's not a political statement.
It was a
It is just-
weekend.
but here's my question: he's filed for re-election. Donald Trump's filed for re-election. By all accounts, by his account, he was campaigning yesterday in Melbourne. That's what he was doing. Is that an appropriate use of his time right now?
Why not? As he said, life
You
is a
can't
campaign.
answer a question with a question.
Why not? I think I loved it. All his supporters over there, 9,000 of them inside that airport, thousands more waiting outside. He is out there doing a campaign in support of his presidency. He feels he's at war with some of the media, and he's out there to promote his own agenda. That's one of the ways of doing it. More power to him. He has a lot of supporters out there that agree with what he's doing.
And I'm not surprised that Mary Lee and all of his supporters are giddy about seeing him on the campaign trail doing what he does best, talking. But the rest of us would like to see him in Washington doing what he was elected to do.
Governing.
And that's governing.
You had no problem with Obama was playing golf on a Saturday. This is a weekend where I don't think anyone's going to work harder than President Trump.
In Obama's first 30 days, he passed a stimulus package that helped to save this nation from the worst crisis financially in history. In the first 30 days, Trump has...
That's a number I'm never going to forget.
Trump has...
Professor Smith. It went
Trump
from
has done nothing.
From $10 trillion in national debt that we had when Obama took office, now we have $20 trillion, and nobody talks about those numbers. That was irresponsible, and that is something that we're going to have to pay with our future generation.
And we talk about saving the auto industry. We talk about the economy going up. We talk about the stock market going up.
The stock market has gone up to record levels since President Trump has been in office.
It was like 4,000 when Obama took office, and he doubled it. We talk about also the fact that the unemployment rate has gone down.
I agree with you. We have 12 million more people in food stamps now since President Obama took office. So those are numbers that are real numbers that we can argue about. I don't think people feel that are in a better position now than they were 8 years ago. I believe that this country needs radical change, and we're going to have radical change in the next 4 years with Trump.
Can I bring it back to this weekend just for a moment? There's so much attention
This was so good, though.
so much attention on the spending, and President Trump, one of the first things he said is, we don't need a new Air Force One. I'm not spending that kind of money. Money-saving guy, but yet we saw Air Force One go from Palm Beach to Melbourne.
44-minute flight.
44-minute flight, and there's been a lot of attention on how much the president's family is spending on security, seeing as they don't really live in the White House full time. Is that a fair
Well, and
question?
he also told the Washington Post that the White House told the Washington Post that they were not going to use Air Force One as a prop at this rally.
Right,
but
didn't they roll
there
it
it
up
was
there?
rolling in
As a prop at the
and
rally.
with this beautiful sunset, and it's great TV. and you have the song from the Air Force One movie playing in the background. But, you know, saying one thing, doing another without a whole lot of transparency about it is always going to raise questions for people like the press. And Michael is right. The president doesn't have an opponent right now. And he was certainly critiquing, you know, judges and Democrats and the media because he needs someone to fight against. He needs a foil. And, you know, the media has long been a foil for politicians, and hooray for adversarial reporters. But when Obama went out of Washington to campaign, right, in his first few weeks in office, because he did that, it was to push the stimulus. There was a specific legislative goal to accomplish from that meeting. I'm not sure what this rally was trying to accomplish other than to get the president back in his comfort zone after a few rough weeks in office.
I think, to say the obvious, he had had a very difficult couple of weeks, and he wanted a little adulation, and it looks like he got it. All right, hold your thoughts, everybody. We're going to talk about fake news and the news media and the president when we come back with a roundtable. Stay with us. Welcome back once again on the Sunday morning. We are in the midst of a robust roundtable. They usually are. H.T. Smith, the president, late Friday afternoon, sent out this tweet. It said, "The fake news media, failing New York Times, NBC News, ABC, CBS, CNN, is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people."
Well, first of all, let me say that America's democracy needs a creative tension between the press and the president.
Right.
It's the responsibility of the press to hold the president to transparency, integrity, and accountability. But it's also the president's right to push back on false news, on inaccurate news, and news that endangers the security of the country. So fake news, I don't like it, but I think that's fair game. The press are big boys and big girls with a lot of computers and a lot of ink.
Right.
I think things that they're not good people, all that's fair. But enemies of the people is language straight out of the book of dictators. It started with Nero and the Roman Empire back in 68 AD to Stalin, Mao Zedong. And then I came across this and I wrote it down because I want to get this right.
Okay.
This is what the propagandist Goebbels for Hitler said.
Yeah.
And every time I read the word Jews, put the word press. The article is entitled, "The Jews Are Guilty. If someone wears the yellow Jewish star, he is an, quote, enemy of the people," end quote. Jews are a parasitic race that feeds like a foul fungus on the cultures of healthy but ignorant peoples. This is only one effective measure: cut them out. Donald Trump and his administration can fight the press, but that language right out of the playbook of dictators should never be spoken ever again by any leader in his administration.
And is it worrisome that there are people on the street as we speak, and I think as journalists we've probably met them, Mary Lee, who spit things like that back at least our local press contingent is not among them?
I mean, I find it just simply awful that you would quote Hitler and try to put in the same playing field what was said about the Jewish people and the Holocaust with something that Donald Trump has said about the media. The media did not act properly during his campaign. He's angry about some of the media, rightly so. I believe the media is going to become better at doing their job and being more careful with their words because he's putting them on the spot. He's free to say whatever he wants against the media. My parents come from Cuba, where they have one media outlet. Venezuela is controlling the media. This does not even, he's not in any way attempting to control the media. He's just saying, do your job and do it better.
And all I'm saying is that he's using the exact same word.
He is not using the same words, Professor Smith. He is
enemy
not.
of the people. The exact same words. I see the handwriting and the DNA of Steve Bannon, a white supremacist who, Donald Trump didn't write these words. This is Bannon.
Yeah.
Donald Trump knows what the words say. He doesn't know what they mean, and he doesn't know they come from there. And even Marilee, you and I should say to this president, the president of all the United States, you can bash the media, that's fair.
Right.
But not use these words. Don't use the words that Hitler used. Don't use the words that Mao Zedong and Lenin used. Don't use the words that Fidel used. Say they're fake news or anything else, but not these words.
Hetty, I'm reminded of a famous saying from a press critic, A.J. Liebling, who said, "The press is free as long as you own one."
I mean, you know, I think we struggle with this. As a big girl reporter.
Yes.
I don't need to be liked. You know, that doesn't really matter to us. But in terms of the broader issue for democracy, it's concerning to have a president who doesn't want to acknowledge the responsibilities and also the necessity of the Fourth Estate. However, if we just sit here and keep talking about it, we might just be propagating the problem, right? I mean, it's kind of what the president wants us to do, create an adversarial relationship as if the media were his opponent, and we are not. We are just going to check whoever is in power.
But there were people in the media, Patty, that were his opponent. There's a leading Spanish anchor in this town that did campaign against Trump. He was clearly in Hillary's side, and he was every night in the news and the largest Spanish media
There's advocacy journalists on both sides,
Right.
and I'm not going to sit here and talk about the merits of different types of journalism.
No, but what I'm saying that there were
some. But
Well,
the point is, it exists on both sides, and when you need a straw man, you put up the media. That's what politicians have
well, I
done
think
from time immemorial.
But you don't have a choice but to fight. You're in a fight. When I went to Vietnam, I didn't.
I don't look at it as being in a fight. I'm doing my job. We are doing our jobs. We report the facts, and that's what we do.
And that's your side of the fact. In other words, he's fighting the facts that you are reporting about what he says, what he tweets, and what he does. That's the way you fight. Not calling him names, but just continuing to report and not ever backing up from doing your job. That's how you fight, and that's how you've been fighting, and I'm proud of it.
HT, thank you. That's going to be the final word.
No.
We can keep going.
No,
I know.
Well, maybe we will after
come
the
back
show,
next
but
week?
for right
We
now,
just
that's going to
bring
be
it
it.
up.
But thank you all for a really
Thank you.
great
Robust.
roundtable. All right.